Welcome to Night Light. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Night Light, a reminder that you are never alone.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're off to a great start to the week. The viewers gave us an early Christmas gift over the last week. The shows we did with Susan Guy and Gary Wayne were watched over 360 times on the archives. Thank you for your support. We are very appreciative. And as we get in closer to the new year, we have some new voices coming up. Regulars will be coming back, but they have new material. So, I think things are closing strong with 2025, and it's just going to continue into the new year. Reverend Michael Carter is appropriately returning to help us have a deeper appreciation for Christmas. You see Michael frequently on Ancient Aliens, his diverse books like Alien Scriptures. So I can't hold that. I have that on PDF. A New World, if you could take it. Which one? I just screwed that there. Forget which hand is holding which book. Initiation, or can be found on Amazon. They're great stocking stuffers. You can learn more about what Michael is doing by going to his website, michaeljscarter.com. All right, let's bring him on. There he is.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Okay. How are you?
Fine.
Thanks for having me on tonight.
Oh,
It's been a while, but it's good. I was actually taking a nap. As I get older, I have to take a nap before I go to sleep. So,
well,
I'm hibernating.
No, I don't blame you. Just
cold, man. It's cold.
Wake up in April.
Yeah. Yes. It'll be here. It'll be here, but not soon enough.
Yeah. You got you're in your new world. Got your where you go.
Yeah.
Autograph. Going back almost into the 12th year from the publication of this.
Yes. And it's amazing because all this stuff is still relevant today. So I don't know whether that's good or not so good, but some of the same questions we were dealing with back then, we're dealing with now.
And Alien Scriptures goes back even
2015, 2014.
Yeah, when have to you where is that? Pull that up on. It must be somewhere in 2013.
Lord.
Jeez.
Well,
Okay. Well,
thank goodness I've written some books since then, huh?
yeah. You're always uh,
Those are my
giving us
favorites.
giving us fresh material. But
Those are my favorites.
alien scriptures got you onto ancient aliens. And
Mhm.
also the episode recently where uh you were on a round table with Rabbi uh Tazdok. Did I say his name right?
Oh yeah, that was with William Shatner.
Yeah. Okay. And uh,
Well, I mean, I think at least one of those was with William
yeah,
Shatner. Yeah,
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 Giorgio and David Hatcher,
yeah.
Childress were there, and so you and the rabbi are kind of there to present a balance to the more scientific discussions. It's when you're doing those kinds of panels, is, is that kind of like a organic conversation? How, uh, what's the room like? It seems like everyone can uh, cross over with science is the same thing as God. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, that was a unique experience because yeah, it was organic. And by that I mean it wasn't so scripted. Usually, like I was in New York about 6 weeks ago shooting some episodes which are supposed to air this spring. And usually the prep is, they will ask you, this is what we want to talk about. Are you versed in this? And if you are, let's talk about it. And then they'll say, okay, we'll get back to you about when we're going to shoot this. And they have a list of questions that I need to research and look up and then be able to answer. And usually we'll shoot maybe 2 or 3 episodes at once. So
mhm,
when I say scripted, it's not like they're telling you what to say,
right.
but this is the topic. These are the questions we'd like you to answer, and boom, you're on. Um, and with that one, it was different because at that time I hadn't been on Ancient Aliens for about I guess about 2 years. It was like a little drought where I hadn't heard from them. And then when they said you were going to be on with William Shatner, it was this is the topic. Um, and we need your expertise. And so we just kind of, like a jazz chord, not a quartet, it was more than four of us, but we just riffed on it. Um, but all the while, you know, the main questions were with Giorgio, the main conversations with Giorgio and Shatner and the regular guest. So we were like, guests, which we usually are. So it was an interesting conversation. Bill Shatner does not believe in God or a God, and it's interesting. It reminded me of Charlton Heston, who was an atheist, but was so convincing playing Moses in the Ten Commandments. And so Bill Shatner, of course, is playing the Starfleet officer on a starship, and so it was that, and he's so convincing, and so it was an interesting conversation. The rabbi and I, as far as I know, are the only two clergy publicly talking about this, which is exciting, but it's also frustrating. Even with all the disclosure and everything going on now, the topic of religion is not really dwelt on in any serious way, and I understand why, because it's going to be a culture. It's going to be a shock to people, but eventually, I think we'll get around to that, and that's what makes Ancient Aliens, at least in my mind, so exciting, is because at least it poses these questions. But right now, we seem to be focused on tech and national security, which is very, 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 very important. But, eventually we're going to have to say, okay, we're not alone. That train has left the station. I don't think we really need to debate that. And so what does that mean for the world's religions?
Okay. Steven Spielberg has a new movie coming out over the summer that is going to be, focused on disclosure. I don't know, it's
Yes,
interesting.
it does. It does. And so we'll see. I'm sure it'll further the conversation. People are already talking about it. Just mentioning it. It's a big billboard in Times Square. So we'll see. We'll see if it's more of the same. And I want to be clear, for people who have been doing this and talking about this for the last 2 or 3 decades, it's not really new stuff. It's for, the movie Disclosure, and you got Marco Rubio and some other politicians and military people talking about it. I think for experiencers and for people who've been doing this, it's kind of more of the same. But for the average American, for the average person, this is new territory. And it's going to be interesting to see how people respond to it.
Okay. All right. So let's get back to a little bit more of the Christmas type story. In Matthew 2, we learn the unusual aerodynamics of the Star of Bethlehem.
Yeah.
I always that's the one in your alien scriptures. Okay, going back to reading my college Bible. It's like, okay, let me take a look at that, and it's like, ooh, that just does not seem like a normal star. So, what what's your interpretation of the Star of Bethlehem?
Well, I want to preface for a few things. I want to thank Dr. Barry Downing because I read his book, The Bible and UFOs and Flying Saucers. The Bible and Flying Saucers came out in 1968, and he was like water to a man in the desert, because I found another. He wasn't an experiencer, but he was a clergy person who said, this is probably a flying saucer in our language. For people who are listening for the first time or maybe not familiar with my work, what I try to do is say that the Bible, the people who wrote the Bible, who edited it, what have you, that I take their word for it. I don't try to say, oh, well, that's symbolism or what have you. If they say this is what we saw, a star move across the sky, I take their word for it. I'm not going to say, well, oh, they meant something else, or I say that these people are using the language of their day to try to tell people what was going on, that they lived in a populated universe, right? That they knew that they were sharing this planet with other beings. The Old Testament talks about that experience of we are sharing this planet with these beings who we think are gods. And so we know that stars don't move across the sky or shine lights down on mangers, because if a star moved across the sky, the whole gravitational pull of the earth would be involved, and we would have tidal waves and earthquakes and all kinds of things going on. So this star is being followed by some wise men from the east. They are following it. We know it's not a comet, as some scholars have said, because it cannot stop and start. Comets don't stop and then move again. This strange star hovers, we're told, over the place where this baby is born. What's interesting about that is a few things outside of the aerodynamics, as you say, of the star, but that it sounds like what the Buddhists do when they're looking for the next Dalai Lama, the next avatar, the next special child who will be a leader. I'm not saying these are Buddhists, but they do come from the East. Mm-hmm. And they are following this star. There's also a prophecy. So there's stories written that this event will happen at this particular time. The other thing that I like about the story is that it internationalizes the story, internationalizes this event, because these wise men go back to the east. They are, now we don't know whether they're from the east side or whether, all we know is that they're coming from the east. But if they are coming indeed from another geographic area, they obviously will go back, share this story with others. And so now we have the story internationalized. It's now with other cultures. It's now in another country. The specialness of this baby being born. So those are just some of the things that are of interest in the birth of this baby.
Okay. Well, a question about the role of the wise men. They appear before Herod, one of the authority figures. Then they make it to the manger. Then
they make it to the manger, and
yeah,
they bring gifts.
Yeah, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And we don't really know. They don't reappear in the story anymore. It just seems like they're there for just a quick scene, but it's very important. And what happens to those characters later in the story, we don't know. But
we don't know. We know that they bring the gifts. We know that Herod tells them, I want to worship the child too. So when you go, come back and tell me where they are so I can pay homage. And they start to do that. And in the story, a messenger, an angel, tells them, do not go back to Herod. They are obviously will go back. So I can pay homage. And they start to do that. And in the story, a messenger, an angel, tells them, do not go back to Herod. They are obviously will go back. So I can pay homage. And they start to do that. And the story, a messenger, an angel, tells them, do not go back to Herod. because he seeks to kill the child. And so they go back by another route, back to where they came from. Interesting, I was talking to one of our board members at church today about this. And he was saying, which is plausible, he was saying, I don't think these, and this is speculation, I don't think these men traveled all that far for nothing. I mean, and just left not to see this baby again. And of course, he was suggesting that, when if Jesus did visit the East and visited India, that perhaps Jesus went back and saw them, which I think is very plausible. He leaves in his teenage years, and then we don't see him again until he's 33 years old. And so he was saying that probably those missing years, maybe he went east and went back to see those people who came to visit him and pay homage to him.
Okay. That's
again, that's not in the Bible, but it is speculation.
No.
Plausible.
Yeah, it's a very believable story. So, okay, so what if these if the child in the manger is a hybrid, he gets beamed would be beamed up at the opening of the book of Acts, and what he says, my father's not of this world.
No, that didn't happen. Those words were uttered in different contexts, in different circumstances.
Okay.
He did say that his kingdom was not of this world. In John.
Okay.
And he says that at his trial, at least according to John, when he's being interrogated is a better word, by Pilate. And we would not know if he was a hybrid then, but at his birth, at least we would not know that. That is, if your father is not human and your mother is, that makes you the hybrid. And so Joseph is his human father, but Joseph is not his biological father. Okay? If the story is true, that Mary is Gabriel comes to her and tells her she's been chosen, and we don't know how that happened, whether it was in vitro fertilization, whether it was she had sex the old-fashioned way, because she did have sons. Jesus had sons, brothers and sisters. Then one would say, well, wait a minute. If your dad is not human and your mother is, that makes you a hybrid. Of course, in the Greeks, they call them titans and demigods. But that would be where that title, that kind of conversation would come in. If your father's not human and your mother is, then you're not fully human. And the word we would use today would be hybrid.
Okay, but thanks for correcting me. But where I was going with it is, could the wise men have had some kind of inkling that okay, this we walk this way, and there's going to be a special child we'll encounter. I like what you said about if they were from say India, maybe Jesus met.
Persia, Iran.
Yeah,
They were astrologers.
yeah,
And again, there were prophecies about a special child being born. So obviously this has happened before. And and again, it's very Buddhist in the sense of that, for instance, the next Dalai Lama, when this Dalai Lama dies, there will be this search, and there will be astrological information that will be checked. There will be scriptures that will, where is this next avatar, this next special birth going to occur? And people, priests, other religious leaders will go to witness, to see if this person, there's stories of in Buddhism, when they're choosing a Dalai Lama, when one Dalai Lama dies and they think this one is coming back as being reincarnated, they take some of the things that the old Dalai Lama had, and they will put it in front of the child. And if the child picks it up and recognizes it, they will say, this is the Dalai Lama. This is the reincarnated avatar. So I'm saying that story reminds me and other scholars of when you're searching for the next bodhisattva, that kind of thing. But apparently they had information, astrological information and scriptural information, that there was going to be a very special child born in this geographic area at this particular time, and it had been prophesied.
yeah. Would where I was, trying to set up their role, the wise men's role, and maybe it could apply to other uh, spiritual leaders. It is, could the people around the children be something like the teachers and mentors that you bring up in initiation?
I'm not following you.
Well, the the after an experiencer has the experience, they're going to encounter someone who is going to help them to uh, process what they experienced and move forward in their growth. And in many cases it is spiritual development. I was just kind of what.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was
now I'm
just kind.
hearing you.
I was
Yeah,
just kind of what is
now I'm
maybe
hearing you.
John the Baptist a better example, but you do have these special people that show up around Jesus.
Yeah, now I'm following you. Yeah, well, when when he goes to the east, let's say he goes east, Jesus, probably he's going to see some of those people. Maybe he did visit those wise men, but he's going to the east. He also winds up visiting Egypt with his parents. We know that there were many mystery schools there, and that at the time, and that there were other very learned scholars and priests and what have you. He goes to India and he learns from various yogis and what have you. That's possible. I'm not ruling that out. That's just not in the story explicitly.
Okay. Well, uh, I just was thinking, maybe there's some kind of connection there in your book Initiation, but let's see what um mm, you also get into the Billy Meyer philosophy, the Palladians from New World, if you can take it.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Palladian spirituality, and then you get in develop that into some of the traits of Billy Meyer's philosophy. They're on page was it 72.
Uh-huh.
It is, you get oneness, eternal spirituality, truth, love, that kind of thing. Okay, those are a few samples of Billy's philosophy. There's a correlation with you know biblical concepts as well. Is as I've read your books and the conversations, is there I think you're one of the leading voices on a spirituality developing out of these alien contacts or abductions. Yeah, um, and it just seems like there's a lot of overlap there between. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, Dr. Howard Thurman, who was a mentor to Martin Luther King Jr., used to say this. He used to say that any truth found in religion is there because it's true. It's not true just because it's found in the religion. And any genuine spiritual path I have found will usually talk about oneness, truth, self-responsibility, love, and so you find that we know the differences in religions, and we argue and we kill each other over them. But sometimes we forget that they're saying the same thing, perhaps in just a different way. And so that overlap uh, is you find in many spiritual paths and religious paths. And I separate them because they're not always, religion and spirituality are not always the same thing, but they can be the same thing. And so we find that whether we're looking at the teachings of the man we call Jesus, we find it in Hinduism, we find it in secular teachings, that we all are one. We all are suffering from this illusion that we are separate from each other by race, class, who we sleep with, what we believe. And so what was so powerful about this Billy Meyer story, controversial though it is, George Adamski, the more modern contact and experience of stories, is there's the same thing, that this stress on oneness, this stress on equality, this stress on the relationship we have with one another and the planet. And so I wanted to mention that because when people read that, they can go, "Oh my God, I've heard this elsewhere." This is not new stuff. It's the same stuff we've been hearing. We just have a hard time putting it into practice.
Okay. It was just interesting to see how experiencers have a change in world outlook, and I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of your
Well, especially, yeah, in initiation. Yeah, they do.
initiation.
Yeah, I know it happened to me. And it's the transformation. Now, everybody doesn't have it. You know, a lot of people who've been traumatized and maybe had a different experience or interpreted their experience in a certain way, they may come away from it saying, man, these beings are demonic. I had sperm taken, I had ovum taken. This was not a pleasant kumbaya, let's all sing Imagine experience. And that is just as valid. But many, many people come away transformed, a less materialistic worldview, a less perspective of separation. Some people have lived lives of just chasing the dollar and wanting to get rich, and they quit their jobs, they become massage therapists, they become energy healers, they become preacher. I mean, it's just a total transformation where they put aside their kind of false self personality and they go to more of what their essence really is. And that has happened to me and countless others. And so it is kind of like an initiation. But it can be a spiritual experience. But we're not talking about that. Not you and I are, but again, we're more focused culturally on not a change of consciousness, but of threat, of tech, and of militarism.
Okay, and you just mentioned your personal transformation, and yeah, you can find it uh, throughout your books.
And just another thing is that, you know, you can have these experiences through near-death experiences. You can have them through tantric experiences. You can have these experiences through meditation. You know, they don't always come from an extraterrestrial kind of contact, even though it can. But there are many ways that you can have these experiences, and they're powerful. And once you've glimpsed a larger picture, it's hard to go back to the way you were thinking and living before. I think Oscar Wilde said, I'm paraphrasing, once the mind is stretched past its original dimensions, it's very difficult for it to go back.
I understand. Yeah, and yeah, as I was, prepping for the show, saw where in alien scriptures, and joining the the Unitarian Universalist Church, maybe it wasn't the right fit at the time. Then, uh, you now you are a minister in there. So, did
Yeah, yeah.
did a lot of that just uh, you, you go into more detail about page.
I mean, when I was raised Baptist, and actually I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister now, but after I was already moving away from kind of organized religion in the sense
Mhm.
of I was moving away from orthodoxy, I'm saved, you're not, everything is a sin, that kind of thing. I was moving away from that before these experiences. And then when I had my experiences, it kind of expedited it. And, you know, the old ways didn't work for me anymore. And so I started on a new path, at least a new path for me. And it gave me much more freedom. It gave me much more room to love, or at least to try to. And it wasn't so regimented. And so I was all, like, as I said, I was already moving away from the Baptist, I'm saved, you're not, us versus them kind of thing, to a more open, to a more inclusive belief system, of a way of life. And so I wound up finding Unitarian Universalism. And that's how, and I pursued that path of ministry.
Okay. And yeah, you do right. I have also in an initiation. I have also had the experiences of meeting reptilians, Arcturians, and praying mantis beings, all of whom would be at various times find their way to my bedroom. I know these contact experiences will continue, and I look forward to it. So, as time went on, I kept having more experiences with with the Space Brothers. So, yeah, is that just reinforcing your interest in a more inclusive worldview?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. The thing is that once you get it, however you get it, that you live in a populated universe, that you're not alone, and then you see some of the other intelligences, you cannot go back to living the same life you were living before. And so I think I started looking at, what does this mean for my belief in God? What does this mean for religion? I am not wired into, I don't, back engineering, technology, that doesn't do it for me. I know greater minds than I are trying to figure that out. But for me, the spiritual aspect of it was intriguing for me. And so that's where I directed my focus and energies. And again, once you get it that you don't live, that human beings aren't the highest evolute, then I think that quite naturally it starts to open up and make you, did with me, look and ask some uncomfortable questions. Well, what does this really mean? And so that's the journey that I have been on. And again, I think that our ancestors in the Bible and other sacred texts and oral traditions from Aboriginal peoples, but I think our ancient ancestors in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament were trying to explain to us what it was like to share the planet with these beings. Because, Mark, I mean, people don't like to use the word, but let's face it, we were invaded. We were invaded. And some of these beings were benevolent and were helpful, and some of them weren't. And so, which is what's still probably going on today. And so I'm coming at it from that angle.
Yeah, and just trying to find the character that he was a bad guy from 11,000 years ago. I think it's a New World Machine take.
Yeah, the Palladians were talking about Jehovah, which is pretty close to Jehovah, and they were telling the story of this warrior Palladian who was a warrior god and who was just not of the highest spiritual evolute. And I found that story very interesting because our equivalent to that would be Yahweh, sometimes called Jehovah. And you read the Old Testament and you see some of his antics, which were very ungod-like, in the sense of he was not the loving, compassionate entity that perhaps Jesus is talking about when he's talking about his Father.
Okay. And these ideas aren't necessarily something that Giorgio came up with over the last nearly 20 years, or not, maybe not 20 years of Ancient Aliens to make a fascinating TV show, but people have had interest in the Space Brothers, whatever term you want to use, and you do document some examples like Origin and Giordano Bruno.
Bruno, yeah,
Uh,
they speculated that we were not alone, that there were other beings. Plato talked about this in his work Timaeus and Critias. He calls them children of the gods. But a lot of our ancient minds were very much aware that we lived in a populated universe. Certainly the Greeks were. Certainly the Hindus were, talking about Vimanas and what all of our ancient civilizations talk about beings who came from the sky, and some of them helped humankind in various ways, and some of them hindered.
Okay. And with the long history of these spiritual leaders who might have, let's just say, like a sci-fi lean towards their preaching or just writing. You also get into some of the holy artifacts that they may have seen or also wrote about. You've commented on some of the holy relics on Ancient Aliens. One was the Ark of the Covenant. You know, what interests you about the Ark of the Covenant, and are there some other ones that really interest you?
No, I did the research on that, and it's pretty well known at this point that that was a communication device that Yahweh used to communicate with the Israelites. That you had to really know what you were doing, because a lot of people touched it and were killed, and of course it was interpreted that Yahweh was angry with them, or they felt the wrath of Yahweh. But that's why they had the priest, and the priest they had to dress a certain way. They had to wear the breastplate which had all these stones and various crystals on it. They had to wear the vestments because it was most likely to keep them from getting radiation poisoning. And but it's quite clear that you had to know how to handle it, because you could die just by touching it the wrong way. And so that's what that episode was about. And various people have confirmed that as far as in the ancient astronaut community, that was a communication device where Yahweh could be in touch with the Israelites, especially during times of war.
Yeah, the mercy seat, just and a couple pages later, just as you were saying, if you touch it wrong, seems like you could be getting radiation poisoning, but
Or you could be electrocuted.
yeah, okay, and you also cover in the book of Exodus, Moses's face is glowing after spending 40 days on the craft with Yahweh. After start reading more of your books, there's just I came away with more of a feeling that there's a lot in the old or the Bible that makes it almost something like Jules Verne would be writing a couple thousand years later. There's like a lot of sci-fi-ish information in there, and it's just all uh woven together with spiritual evolution. I mean,
Yeah,
very interesting.
I would say that the Bible, especially the Old Testament, is a book of ET contact. It's not a book about God. It's not a book about God. And we've been taught to read it as a book about God. And I think that's why a lot of people left religion or leave religion, because they look at, for instance, what Yahweh does. And Yahweh is very warlike. Yahweh's into human sacrifice. Yahweh is very concerned about who you're sleeping with. And, he's got a lot of issues there. And people are saying, I can't believe in a God like that. And that's where they get confused, because they're thinking that this is the almighty, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent energy that some of us or some people call God. And they're not about God. They're about the Hebrew people, this tribe, the tribe of Jacob, because it's not even all of the Israelites, it's the tribe of Jacob. Yahweh gets, and when you go to, is it Exodus 32? Deuteronomy, I have to go back and look, but he is given the tribe of Jacob, and they have no land. And so he has to fight to get land. And so these beings are fighting among themselves. Kamash, Milcon, Baal, these are some of the names of some of the other Elohim in the book. And so it's not a story about God. It's a story about these beings who've come here, who have divvied up the earth, and how they interact with one another. When they fight these wars, the human beings are fighting with them. When you go back and read Zechariah Sitchin's The Wars of Gods and Men, he's talking about this. When you go look at the Hindu Mahabharata and the Vedas, and these beings are fighting each other, who's helping them? Human beings, because they've chosen which God they're going to follow. When Moses meets Yahweh and he says, who are you? What's your name? That's absurd. You would never ask the God, the great God of the universe, hey man, what's your name? But he's trying to find out from Yahweh, who are you? Which God are you? So he knows whether I can follow this God or do I stick with the gods that we already know? It's clearly there in the text. There was a henotheism in the text. We know what monotheism is. There's the belief in one God. We know what pantheism is the belief in many gods. Henotheism is we acknowledge many gods, but we choose to worship one. So Moses and is trying to figure out which God are we going to worship. We were worshiping the gods of Egypt, but we escaped from Egypt. Pharaoh was keeping us as slaves, so we escaped. The stories in the Old Testament are taken from the Mesopotamian text, where these Elohim in Hebrew are now called the Anunnaki. The only difference between the two is that Judaism decided to monotheize, so they got rid of all the other gods. Asherah, Milcom, Baal, Chemosh. They're all mentioned in the Bible. They wanted to monotheize. The Mesopotamians had no problem with many gods. Remember, Abraham is from where? Mesopotamia. He's from Mesopotamia. And he's negotiating with Yahweh. Yahweh says, I will make you the father of many nations. Because he's saying, what are you going to give me? If I follow you, what are you going to do for me? They had no problem with many gods. The Hebrews in the 6th to 8th century BCE, they started editing the Bible. They started taking everything out of the Bible that wasn't about Yahweh. They wanted one God, one temple, one high priest. Why? It's just easier to govern that way. It's just easier to govern. But we've been taught that these are God stories. What do you do with the? How do you say when Yahweh asks for Abraham to sacrifice his son, and then at the last minute, and Abraham doesn't question it. At least we're told. We don't hear what Sarah has to say. What mother is just going to go, oh, okay, he wants to sacrifice. We don't hear her story because she was a woman. But what God would do that? And then at the last minute, send an angel to say, Abraham, don't do it, don't do it. We just wanted to know if you were faithful to us. What kind of God plays those kind of games? And so my point is that if you worship a God who believes in genocide, who believes in having slaves, who believes in killing men, women, and children, who believes in human sacrifice, if that's the God you believe in, then you're going to think it's okay for you to do the same thing. To be revenge, to have revenge, to us versus them. They're not like us. They're not circumcised. They're not this. They're not that. If you worship that, then that's what you think is okay to do. And so when you go to the Bible and say that's God, I say, no, that's an astronaut. That's someone from somewhere else. And so then Jesus comes along several thousand years later, and he's talking about a different God. He calls him his Father, a God of love, a God of compassion, a God of mercy. Jesus's Father sounds very different from Yahweh. I was led to believe that Yahweh was Jesus's father. But when I read those scriptures, that's not true. They're not talking about the same person. And what's interesting is that Jesus never once mentions Yahweh's name. Never once does he mention Yahweh. I find that curious.
Yeah. Yeah. This is becoming a mini sermon. No, I'm just really impressed. It's you made for a very enlightening, uplifting show. Yeah.
I mean, just for the record, hold on, because I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to share this with you. And I want to be clear. I am not trying to take away faith. I'm not. And I believe in something greater than me. Sometimes I call it God, sometimes I call it the source. So, it doesn't matter what you call it. Because I know people say, can I still keep my religious beliefs and still believe in extraterrestrial life? And I say, of course you can. That's what the Bible's all about. These people are wrestling. They're worshiping. What's going on here? But they lose. If you go to, and I'm not saying you do it tonight, but whoever's listening, go to 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verses 5 to 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 8, 5 to 6. Paul admits that there are other gods. He admits that. It's right there. If you look at, hold on. If you go to Judges chapter 11, Yahweh talks about Kamash, and both Elohim have different followers. Kamash is another one of the Elohim. The Kosh, Kamash, Milton, Astarte, Dagon, Malach, Elyon, El Shaddai, Baal. These are all of the other gods. When Yahweh says, you'll have no other gods before me, he's serious, because there are other gods there. There are other Elohim. But I wanted to go, if you go to Daniel 10, verse 13, the angel Michael comes to assist Daniel. And he tells Daniel, he said, I would have been here 3 weeks ago, but I was fighting the prince of Persia. The prince of Persia is most likely another Elohim. If it was another human prince, Michael's an archangel. Michael would probably take care of that in a matter of minutes. But he's saying, I was fighting the prince of Persia, so it took me 3 weeks to get to you. Okay? That's in Daniel 10, verse 13. So it's clear that there are other beings in the Bible besides Yahweh, and that all of them are fighting over land and resources and human beings. So I know it's after 10, and I know the time is up, but those are things you can research on your own. But it's right there.
Yeah, I'm reading along with you. Very fascinating. We'll have to have you back to continue Bible studies. But I think you just gave us so much to think about as we go into the
as we go into Christmas.
Yeah,
as we go, the Christmas story. I am a minister. I have my own church. I'm a healer with the energy work, the Reiki work, and I'm an experiencer. And I want people to know what I'm telling you, because a lot of the troubles that we have in our world are not always, some of those we have help with, and we can go back to those Bible stories. But I want people to know that you can still believe and know that we live in a populated universe, but you don't have to give up your faith traditions. You can if you want, because it may lead you to, but you don't have to. Jesus knew that we lived in a populated universe, just like Solomon does, and Daniel does, and all the heroes and sheroes of the Bible. And they're telling us this is what it was like to share the planet with these beings. Whether you talk about the Cherokee and their connection with the Palladians, or the Hopi, whether you talk about the Vikings, the Nordic culture, whether you talk about the Aboriginal cultures in Australia, whether you talk about the African religions on that huge continent, they're all stories about beings who came down from the sky. They intermingled with human beings. They married earth women. They had children by them. You have those stories told in the Greek, about the Greek gods. These were gods who made love. They drank. They got drunk. They fought each other. These stories are true. They're telling us this. But we've been told, oh, that's metaphor. It's symbolic. But we're finding out through archaeology. We're finding out through scriptural studies and religion that our ancestors were telling us the truth. And we have to open our eyes and get it. And some of these beings were very friendly with us, helped us, rebooted us, taught us what plants were good for consciousness, what were poisonous, told us about how to live, and astrology, astronomy, taught us about how to use crystals, as Enoch talks about, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And some of them were not so keen on us. The Tower of Babel story is one of those stories about that. The Mayan Popol Vuh talks about some of these beings wanting to get rid of us. The flood story is a story about some of these Elohim saying, let them drown. They're noisy. There's too many of them.
Yeah,
we just need them for slavery. So these are not Bible stories. These are not God stories. These are stories about what it's like to have your planet invaded. So maybe we'll talk about it in depth at another time.
Well, I think you got us off to a great start. Get to think about, the big holiday coming up in
9
and
you days. You can still enjoy the holiday. Because that story is not to tell you that there is no God or Jesus is not who he was or is. That's your matter of your faith. But he lived. We're still talking about him 2,000 odd years later. I mean, he was so influential that we divide up time into AD and BC. And he brought a message to the world that we were cared about and that we are loved and that we are children of God. And we need to remember that. And so we're celebrating his birth. Of course, he wasn't born December 25th, but that's not the issue. We are saying that this person was significant enough that we want to celebrate that existence and those teachings and what he taught us and how we can become better people.
I think that's a great message. And Michael, I know you have to do that thing tomorrow morning called going to work, but do you want to plug your website.
Oh,
Anything else?
yeah. Thank
And
you.
yeah. I just I know you're busy. We just instead of doing 2 hours, why don't we just like do two 1 hour
Yeah,
shows? This is a great information just to soak in at Christmas time. So
just
go
the
ahead and
beginning. Well, my website is Michael J.S. Carter. Uh, uh, .com. I'm sorry, that's my email, but my website is Michael J.S. Carter. You can contact me there, buy my books. They're on Amazon. I have about 5 or 6 books out. One of them is a book of sermons, but you can go online and see that. Just type in my name, and I will. Mark and I keep in touch. I just shot some episodes of Ancient Aliens this month. Is this still December? Yeah.
yes.
And I'll keep Mark posted. They're supposed to air this spring. Keep on keeping on and just try to be the best you can, the best human being. It's hard being a human being. It's hard being a good human being. Keep doing that. And don't let fear get the best of you. And hopefully, I'll see you next time.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you, Michael.